Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, by Mark Twain. Chapter 4. Well, 3 or 4 months run along, and it was well into the winter now. I had been to school most all the time, and could spell and read and write just a little, and could say the multiplication table up to 6 times 7 is 35, and I don't reckon I could ever get any further than that if I was to live forever. I don't take no stock in mathematics anyway. At first I hated the school, but by and by I got so I could stand it. Whenever I got uncommon tired I played hooky, and the hiding I got next day done me good and cheered me up. So the longer I went to school the easier it got to be. I was getting sort of used to the widow's ways, too, and they warn't so raspy on me. Living in a house and sleeping in a bed pulled on me pretty tight mostly, but before the cold weather I used to slide out and sleep in the woods sometimes, and so that was a rest to me. I liked the old ways best, but I was getting so I liked the new ones, too, a little bit. The widow said I was coming along slow but sure and doing very satisfactory. She said she weren't ashamed of me. One morning I happened to turn over the salt cellar at breakfast. I reached for some of it, as quick as I could, to throw over my left shoulder and keep off the bad luck. But Miss Watson was in ahead of me and crossed me off. She says, "Take your hands away, Huckleberry. What a mess you are always making." The widow put in a good word for me, but that warn't going to keep off the bad luck, I knowed that well enough. I started out after breakfast, feeling worried and shaky and wondering where it was going to fall on me, and what it was going to be. There is ways to keep off some kinds of bad luck, but this wasn't one of them kind, so I never tried to do anything, but just poked along low-spirited and on the watch-out. I went down to the front garden and clumb over the stile where you go through the high board fence. There was an inch of new snow on the ground, and I seen somebody's tracks. They'd come up from the quarry and stood around the stile a while, and then went on around the garden fence. It was funny they hadn't come in, after standing around so. I couldn't make it out. It was very curious, somehow. I was going to follow around, but I stooped down to look at the tracks first. I didn't notice anything at first, but next I did. There was a cross in the left boot heel made with big nails, to keep off the devil. I was up in a second and shining down the hill. I looked over my shoulder every now and then, but I didn't see nobody. I was at Judge Thatcher's as quick as I could get there. He said, "Why, my boy, you are all out of breath. Did you come for your interest?" "No, sir," I says. "Is there some for me?" "Oh, yes, a half-yearly is in last night. Over $150. Quite a fortune for you. You'd better let me invest it along with your 6,000, because if you take it you'll spend it." "No, sir," I says. "I don't want to spend it. I don't want it at all, nor the 6,000 nother. I want you to take it. I want to give it to you, the 6,000 and all." He looked surprised. He couldn't seem to make it out. He says, "Why, what can you mean, my boy?" I says, "Don't you ask me no questions about it, please. You'll take it, won't you?" He says, "Well, I'm puzzled. Is something the matter?" "Please take it," says I. "And don't ask me nothing, then I won't have to tell no lies." He studied a while, and then he says, "Oh, I think I see. You want to sell all your property to me, not give it. That's the correct idea." Then he wrote something on a paper and read it over, and says, "There, you see it says, 'for a consideration.' That means I have bought it of you and paid you for it. Here's $1 for you. Now you sign it." So I signed and left. Miss Watson's nigger, Jim, had a hairball as big as your fist, which had been took out of the fourth stomach of an ox, and he used to do magic with it. He said there was a spirit inside of it, and it knowed everything. So I went to him that night and told him pap was here again, for I found his tracks in the snow. What I wanted to know was what he was going to do, and was he going to stay. Jim got out his hairball and said something over it, and then he held it up and dropped it on the floor. It fell pretty solid, and only rolled about an inch. Jim tried it again, and then another time, and it acted just the same. Jim got down on his knees and put his ear against it and listened, but it warn't no use. He said it wouldn't talk. He said sometimes it wouldn't talk without money. I told him I had an old slick counterfeit quarter that warn't no good because the brass showed through the silver a little, and it wouldn't pass nohow, even if the brass didn't show, because it was so slick it felt greasy, and so that would tell on it every time. I reckoned I wouldn't say nothing about the dollar I got from the judge. I said it was pretty bad money, and maybe the hairball would take it, because maybe it wouldn't know the difference. Jim smelt it, and bit it, and rubbed it, and said he would manage so the hairball would think it was good. He said he would split open a raw Irish potato, and stick the quarter in between, and keep it there all night, and next morning you couldn't see no brass, and it wouldn't feel greasy no more, and so anybody in town would take it in a minute, let alone a hairball. Well, I knowed a potato would do that before, but I had forgot it. Jim put the quarter under the hairball, and got down and listened again. This time he said the hairball was all right. He said it would tell my whole fortune if I wanted it to. I says, go on. So the hairball talked to Jim, and Jim told it to me. He says, "The old father don't know yet what he's going to do. Sometimes he spec he'll go away, and then again he spec he'll stay. The best way is to rest easy and let the old man take his own way. Dey's two angels hovering round about him. One of 'em is white and shiny, and t'other one is black. The white one gets him to go right in a little while, den the black one's sailin' and bust it all up. A body can't tell yet which one gwine to fetch him at the last. But you is all right. You gwine to have considerable trouble in your life and considerable joy. Sometimes you're gwine to get hurt, and sometimes you're gwine to get sick, but every time you's gwine to get well again. Dey's two gals flyin' about you in your life. One of 'em's light and t'other one is dark. One is rich and t'other is po'. You's gwine to marry the po' one first, and the rich one by and by. You wants to keep away from the water as much as you can, and don't run no resk, case it's down the bills dat you's gwine to git hung." When I lit my candle and went up to my room that night, there sat pap, his own self. In Chapter 5. I had shut the door to. Then I turned round, and there he was. I used to be scared of him all the time, he tanned me so much. I reckoned I was scared now, too. But in a minute I see I was mistaken. That is, after the first jolt, as you may say, when my breath sort of hitched, he being so unexpected. But right away after I see I weren't scared of him worth bothering about. He was most 50, and he looked it. His hair was long and tangled and greasy and hung down, and you could see his eyes shining through like he was behind vines. It was all black, no gray. So was his long mixed-up whiskers. There warn't no color in his face, where his face showed. It was white. Not like another man's white, but a white to make a body sick, a white to make a body's flesh crawl, a tree-toad white, a fish-belly white. As for his clothes, just rags, that was all. He had one ankle resting on t'other knee. The boot on that foot was busted, and two of his toes stuck through, and he worked them now and then. His hat was laying on the floor, an old black slouch with the top caved in, like a lid. I stood a-looking at him. He set there looking at me, with his chair tilted back a little. I set the candle down. I noticed the window was up, so he had clum in by the shed. He kept a-looking me all over. By and by he says, "Starchy clothes, ver. You think you're a good deal of big bug, don't you?" "Maybe I am, maybe I ain't," I says. "Don't you give me none of your lip," says he. "You've put on considerable many frills since I've been away. I'll take you down a peg before I get done with you. You're educated, too, they say. Can read and write. You think you're better'n your father now, don't you, because he can't? I'll take it out of you. Who told you you might meddle with such highfalutin foolishness, hey? Who told you you could?" "The widow, she told me." "The widow, hey? And who told the widow she could put in her shovel about thing that ain't none of her business?" "Nobody never told her." "Well, I'll learn her how to meddle. And looky here, you drop that school, you hear? I'll learn people to bring up a boy to put on airs over his own father and let on to be better'n what he is. You lemme catch you fooling around that school again, you hear? Your mother couldn't read, and she couldn't write nuther, before she died. And none of the family couldn't before they died. I can't. And here you're a swelling yourself up like this. I ain't the man to stand it, you hear? Say, let me hear you read." I took up a book and begun something about General Washington and the wars. When I'd read about a half minute he fetched the book a whack with his hand and knocked it across the house. He says, "It's so. You can do it. I had my doubts when you told me. Now, looky here. You stop that putting on frills. I won't have it. I'll lay for you, my smarty, and if I catch you about that school I'll tan you good. First, you know, you'll get religion, too. I never see such a son." He took up a little blue and yaller picture of some cows and a boy, and says, "What's this?" "It's something they give me for learning my lessons good." He tore it up, and says, "I'll give you something better. I'll give you a cowhide." He set there a-mumbling and a-growling a minute, and then he says, "Ain't you a sweet-scented dandy, though? A bed, and bedclothes, and a looking-glass, and a piece of carpet on the floor, and your own father got to sleep with the hogs in the tan-yard. I never see such a son. I bet I'll take some of these frills out of you before I'm done with you. Why, there ain't no end to your heirs. They say you're rich. Eh? How's that?" "They lie, that's how." "Looky here. Mind how you talk to me. I'm a-standing about all I can stand now, so don't give me no sass. I've been in town 2 days, and I hain't heard nothing but about you being rich. I heard about it way down the river, too. That's why I come. You get me that money tomorrow. I want it." "I ain't got no money." "It's a lie. Judge Thatcher's got it. You get it. I want it." "I ain't got no money, I tell you. You ask Judge Thatcher. He'll tell you the same." "All right. I'll ask him. And I'll make him pungle, too, or I'll know the reason why. Say, how much you got in your pocket? I want it." "I ain't got only $1, and I want that to—" "It don't make no difference what you want it for. You just shell it out." He took it and bit it to see if it was good, and then he said he was going downtown to get some whiskey. Said he hadn't had a drink all day. When he got out on the shed he put his head in again and cussed me for putting on frills and trying to be better than him, and when I reckoned he was gone, and he come back and put his head in again and told me to mind about school, because he was going to lay for me and lick me if I didn't drop that. Next day he was drunk, and he went to see Judge Thatcher's and bully-ragged him and tried to make him give up the money, but he couldn't, and then he swore he'd make the law force him. The judge and the widow went to law to get the court to take me away from him and let one of them be my guardian, but it was a new judge that had just come, and he didn't know the old man. So he said the courts mustn't interfere and separate families if they could help it. Said he'd druther not take a child away from its father. So Judge Thatcher and the widow had to quit on the business. That pleased the old man till he couldn't rest. He said he'd cowhide me till I was black and blue if I didn't raise some money for him. I borrowed $3 from Judge Thatcher, and pap took it and got drunk, and went a-blowing around and cussing and whooping and carrying on. And he kept it up all over town with a tin pan till most midnight. Then they jailed him, and next day they had him before court and jailed him again for a week. But he said he was satisfied, said he was boss of his son, and he'd make it warm for him. When he got out the new judge said he was a-going to make a man of him. So he took him to his own house and dressed him up clean and nice, and had him to breakfast and dinner and supper with the family, and was just old pie to him, so to speak. And after supper he talked to him about temperance and such things till the old man cried, and said he'd been a fool, and fooled away his life, but now he was a-going to turn over a new leaf and be a man nobody wouldn't be ashamed of, and he hoped the judge would help him and not look down on him. The judge said he could hug him for them words. So he cried, and his wife she cried again. Pap said he'd been a man that had always been misunderstood before, and the judge said he believed it. The old man said that what a man wanted that was down was sympathy, and the judge said it was so. So they cried again. And when it was bedtime the old man rose up and held out his hand and says, "Look at it, gentlemen and ladies all. Take a hold of it. Shake it. There's a hand that was the hand of a hog, but it ain't so no more. It's the hand of a man that started in on a new life, and he'll die before he'll go back. You mark them words, don't forget I said them. It's a clean hand now. Shake it, don't be afeard." So they shook it, one after the other, all around, and cried. The judge's wife she kissed it. Then the old man he signed a pledge, made his mark. The judge said it was the holiest time on record, or something like that. Then they tucked the old man into a beautiful room which was the spare room, and in the night sometime he got powerful thirsty and clumb out on the porch roof and slid down a stanchion and traded his new coat for a jug of 40 rod, and clumb back again and had a good old time. And towards daylight he crawled out again, drunk as a fiddler, and rolled off the porch and broke his left arm in 2 places, and was most froze to death when somebody found him after sunup. And when they come to look at that spare room they had to take soundings before they could navigate it. The judge he felt kind of sore. He said he reckoned a body could reform the old man with a shotgun, maybe, but he didn't know no other way.